Emma. My name is Susan Kennerknecht, and I'd like to welcome you to my apiary. So today I'm going to go through an inspection with you, and first I'm going to talk about the location of my apiary, which is in a suburb of Montreal. It's in our backyard. And so some of the pros are the fact that I can actually see the apiary right from my kitchen window, which is great. There's lots of beautiful forage around my backyard and the neighborhood, lots of fruit trees in the neighborhood, a lot of vegetable gardens, a lot of perennial flowers. There's lots of stuff blooming now, rudbeckia, echinacea, the borage just finished, the sedum is coming, the clematis are out, I've got lots of squash, hemerocallis, anyway, lots of good forage, so that's a pro. As far as location, it's really out of sight because it's in the back of the backyard. The large cedar hedge keeps it out of sight from the park. In the park there's lots of natural forage, which is great. Another positive thing is I've got my hives all on concrete blocks, which keeps them high and dry even in the spring. And also pests like small hive beetle, should there ever be any, can't just lay their larvae and pupate in the soil underneath the hive, so that's a good thing. Maybe some cons are, well, if you look at the hives, they all pretty much look the same to us and to the bees as well. And so unfortunately that would increase the chances of drifting between hives, which could share diseases and infections, and also robbing of a weaker hive. As you can see on the far right, I've got, it's actually split from this here, which is actually weaker hive, so I've got an entrance reducer. However, having said all that, I'm going to today inspect the third hive from the left, so it's the one just to the right of the black walnut tree. And talking about the black walnut tree, one of the other cons is that I often bash my head on that branch when I'm doing my inspection, but such is life. As you know, I'm wearing gloves and a full bee suit because I am allergic to bee stings, and of course I've got my EpiPen with me all the time. Safety first. So come on over, let's have a look at a closer look at the hive. So my husband is going to come towards me because he's standing right now in the flight path. Yeah, you can go in the back, that's great. Okay, he's going into the apiary from the other side, which is fine. So, okay, what I'm going to do is, first of all, I would like him to zoom in on right here the landing board of the hive. So this hive is called Baby Shark because she is a swarm that I caught last 2019, June the 22nd, when Virginie, my first hive, swarmed while I was in the backyard gardening. So thank goodness I saw her swarm. I caught the swarm 30 feet up in a juniper tree, and here's Baby Shark. So she is an overwintered swarm. And so if I look at the landing board right now, it's right now is July the 21st. It's about 4:30 in the afternoon, and it's about 27 degrees. So a nice warm day, calm wind, a little bit of clouds. So I've got a lot of activity coming in. Oh, I just saw a bee come in there with pollen on her legs. Here's a drone. I've got some nice activity. I've got foragers still going out. Got more coming in than going out at this point. I'm also listening to the sound. They're not overly loud. So it's a good sound. They seem calm, they seem happy. We've got a flow going on. And I'm also smelling to see if I smell any foul odors. I certainly don't. I smell nothing right now, but sometimes I get a little whiff of honey. So I've got nice activity. I notice that this hive brings in pollen in the morning, usually before 10 o'clock. In the afternoon, probably water and you know, nectar forager bees. Just one other thing, I'm going to ask my husband just to zoom down on the little bucket that's there and perhaps do a little pan of the front of the apiary. I've got a bunch of water oases here, which helps to keep the bees in, when they're looking for water, helps to keep them drinking water in my own backyard instead of in the neighbors' pools. So while my husband comes around to the back of the hive, I'm going to describe what I'm going to be doing today. So I'm just going to let him come on in and come to the back where he's not going to be in my shadow. And so here is Baby Shark, as I said. Now, as you can see, I've got 2 honey supers, and what I can expect today, being the end of July, is I can expect a good strong population. I'm going to be looking for my queen, eggs, larvae and cat brood of all ages. I'm going to be looking for if I see any pests or diseases. I just saw a wasp. That, unfortunately, we've got wasps around, and I wouldn't be surprised if a wasp tries to come in and rob, but I'll try and minimize that. So I'm going to check the general health of the brood nest. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to remove these 2 honey supers and put them off here on my bench. And the purpose of that is I'm just going to take them off, and I'm going to just leave them off to the side and get on with my brood inspection. I actually removed 5 frames of fully capped honey just a few days ago and gave them a little extra room because I was afraid that they might get honey bound, as my other hive did, so to prevent swarming. So without further ado, I'm going to grab my smoker, which is well lit, and I'm just going to puff a bit of smoke at the entrance. If you can come over the top and just look down to see how I do that. I want to make sure that I puff the entrance just a little bit, give a little bit of notice. The bees have to feel the smoke. Let any guard bees, which by the way I didn't see any guard bees earlier, but that just gives them an idea that okay, something's going on, somebody's coming in. So I'm just giving another little puff of smoke. As I open the lid, I'll be looking real quick for any incidents of hive beetle, which is a tiny little black beetle, which will scurry very quickly. Unfortunately, that's been found in Quebec. It was brought into Quebec this May for the first time, so hopefully not. But I'm always looking out for that. So here we go. And I've got no hive beetle. I've got a few bees. I'm just going to puff a bit of smoke to let them know Mama's coming in. And I'm going to put my cover over here. Now, I did forget a towel today, but I've got some newspapers, so that'll do, and I'll tell you in a second what that's all about. So because I'm not going to inspect my honey supers at this instant, I'm just going to crack them off, add a little bit of smoke in there, and I'm just going to put them over on my table, crosswise, so that I reduce the risk of crushing any bees. And I'm also, I've got a lovely, if you take a look in there, I've got essentially 10 frames of bees in here. Got a nice honey super. As I mentioned, I did put in a few extra drawn comb in order to give them some room. So I'm just gonna crack over the queen excluder. I certainly do not want to remove the queen excluder at this instant. I will in a moment to get into the brood nest. So I'll just bring these over gently. I always keep an extra hive lid around to do just this. Now normally I put a little towel on top if I'm going to keep the honey super off for any period of time. So I'll just cover them up because they prefer the dark. I find that works well to keep them calm. So now I've got a fabulous population going on here. Give them a little bit of smoke, get them down into the nest, and then I'll remove the queen excluder. So what I'll be looking for, as I mentioned, I'll be looking for eggs and cased, so male, female, queen of all ages, looking at the general health of the hive. So I just want to make sure my queen is not on here, and she is not. So I'll put the queen excluder just leaning on the hive stand in the front, so any bees can easily crawl up into the hive. Now, so here we go. I'm just going to give them a little more smoke. We've got some pollen in there. Looks like a nice, healthy, quiet, happy hive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently remove the second frame in order to give myself a little bit more room to work with as I'm taking out the frames, because if you have a bit of room, you're less likely to squish any bees, because we really don't want to do that, and you especially don't want to squish the queen. I'm just going to remove this frame. You want to be really careful to move slowly, calmly, and vertically. You don't want to squish any bees on the sides or on the face of the frames. Now I've got brood here, and I've got, you know, I would say about 70% of the frame is covered with adult bees. So I just, I'm going to lay the corner down here for a sec. I'd just like to point out that most of the bees that are on this frame, because there's brood, would be nurse bees. Here would be a drone right here. If you could zoom in on this guy, he's quite big, and that's how I know he's a drone. Here's another drone over here walking around. But most of these bees, because it is a brood frame, would be nurse bees, meaning they're less than 2 weeks old. They're the ones that take care of the next generation, the brood, their sisters. They have various roles. They take care of the queen, they feed her, they remove her waste, and they're feeding brood. Now, if I look down, this is the top of the hive frame here. If I look down into the frames, I'm going to look to see if I have any eggs. And I do not have any eggs here. I'm looking in the empty cells. I don't have any royal jelly either. I just have cap brood. So it tells me the queen has not been on this frame for a little while. Now, because this frame has brood on it, I don't want to take it out and leave it on the side of the hive, because it's going to cool the brood, and the brood needs 33 to 37 Celsius to develop really healthy. So what I'm going to do in this case, to make room for my inspection, I'm going to remove this last frame, which really should be pollen and or nectar. So that's the nutrition in the colony. And I shouldn't have brood on here, and in fact I do not. See, I've got some, can you zoom in on that lovely pollen of different colors? So that would be bee bread that they've stored in order to feed the larvae. So if I point that out, so here's my bee bread in this area. There we go, and here's my honey in this area. It's normal that we would see honey like in an arc, and bee bread as well around. If there was brood, it would be down here normally. And on this side, I'm just blowing to get the bees off so you can see I've got a fabulous frame of bee bread. So that's great. So this is the frame that I'm going to just put gently on the ground. Here's a worker bee with pollen on her legs. So that's a forager that just came back, and she's looking where she's going to hand that off and store that as bee bread. Did you get that? You did. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm just going to put that frame down here gently, and I put it near the front of the hive so that if any bees fall off, they don't have far to walk to crawl back into the hive. So again, as I said, this was a brood frame, so I'm going to put her back into the hive, and I'll just make sure my queen didn't end up on it, and she did not. So I'll just put this frame in the end and just moving any girls out of the way so I don't crush them with the little end bars. Okay, so they're coming out, they're curious, they're seeing what's going on. I'll just give them a little puff of smoke, turn their heads back down into the nest, and we've got some flying around. Puff myself so I'm not a threat to them. Okay, so let me continue. I'll look at my second frame. And what I'm always looking for is I'm always looking for the queen. I'm always looking for eggs. If I don't find a queen, if I find eggs which are always less than 3 days old or less, then I know I have a laying queen. But I'm on the lookout for all these things. So here I've got another beautiful frame of brood, 90% covered with nurse bees. So I've got cap brood. Oh, and I'd love to show you right in here. Oh, can you see that? I've got larvae in the upper left quadrant of the frame. I've got larvae that would be, yeah, I'm holding the frame so it's hard to show you. Can you zoom in? No, that's pollen. Just go to the right. Just go over here where my thumb is.
Okay.
And we've got some lovely larvae that's...
in here, yeah.
Yeah, okay. There you go. Thanks for that. And so that larvae would be between, 4 and 9 days old or so. So that's great. I've got some younger larvae down in the bottom here. And so, and I got a bit of pollen. So nice mixed brood. Again, the bees are nice and calm. And we've got some great sunshine, lots of bees. I'm not seeing my queen yet. So here I've got a forager that brought some pollen in right there. There she is. So that bee, being a forager, would be where my thumb is. That's it right there. She would be over 2 weeks old, because when they are about 2 weeks old, that's when they convert to foraging. So again, nice brood pattern. I'm seeing a few spots in the brood. Now, I'm just going to keep my eye on that to make sure I don't have what we call spotty brood, which can happen for different reasons. It could be because you have a lot of varroa mites, but I'll get to that later. But it could also mean that maybe I have a bit of inbreeding. So spotty brood happens when the queen lays an egg, but the female, that's supposed to be a female, ends up getting 2 identical copies of the CSD, or the complementary sex determination gene. And if the girl gets 2 identical sets, then she becomes a diploid male, which she's going to be, that diploid male would be cannibalized by his sisters, and that's why they would remove him from. So it's possible that's why I have a few spots there, but I'm not concerned. It's not too much. I don't see my queen yet. I do see, oh, this is a really interesting frame. Look at that. I've got some cool, I'm just going to put it down. Maybe we can crouch down if possible. So I've got, this is drone cells right here. They're larger and they come out more. And so the larva that's in here, can you see right into the cells?
Yep.
Yeah, good. So the larva that's in there, those are drones. We've got some pollen up here, nice nutrition. Here I've got some cap drone cells. If you could zoom in and look at that, you see how they're actually bumped up from, I'll go from the top. You can see how they're bumped up from the edge of the frame. Can you see that?
No, it's okay.
All right, have you got that?
No, hang on.
You see how they're bumped out? And then the cap brood, oh, there's a wasp. The cap brood, that's flat, that would be the females. So again, I've got some nice drone larvae here. And so that's a really cool frame. Lots of pollen. And I'm not seeing any eggs though yet. So I'm thinking my queen has not been on this frame for a little while either. I'm just blowing to get the bees to move out of my way. Now, can I see some? No, I've got dry cells. I'm not seeing any royal jelly. Royal jelly comes from pollen and bee bread, and they would be putting royal jelly into the cells in order for the larvae to eat. I'm just going to keep looking through to see, hopefully find my queen and find my eggs, and determine whether or not this is a queen right colony, although the population looks really lovely right now. For this time of year, it's a really good population. It's where I would expect it to be. The stores look pretty good so far. I probably have more honey on this end of the hive because they tend to put honey on the outside of the brood nest and then pollen closer and around the brood nest. Wow, look at this frame. This is a gorgeous frame. If you can just pan that, that's a beautiful frame of cap brood. So I'm seeing, again, I'm seeing nurse bees. I'm seeing a drone here. The nurse bees are feeding and tending to the brood. There's heater bees that actually heat up the brood and keep them warm. You can't see that unless you have a thermal camera. I've got some nice pollen down here. And again, I'm not seeing eggs in those holes. Those are probably recently hatched bees as well. And my other side of my frame, again, lots of strong population. Don't see my queen yet. Not surprising, as I mentioned, because I'm not seeing any eggs yet. So I'm just going to gently put those in. I keep the frames pretty much together in order to, you know, to respect the bee space, so that when I end up closing up the hive again, I have less of a risk of crushing the bees. Oops. Use my hive tool here. And there we go, get that. Okay, that's a honeybee, that's okay. Alrighty, they're nice and quiet, they're happy. Now, you see on the bottom, I've got bees hanging off the bottom a little bit. Those would be the foragers that have just come in from their foraging trip, and they're usually staying close to the bottom and the entrance of the hive in order to, you know, hand off their stores and then get right back out and do their job. So, and those foragers would be over 2 weeks old. So I'm looking across my frame from the top, looking down into my cells, and want to see if I see some eggs in here. Let me get the sun really at my back, and if I do, I'll let my husband know. I do not see the queen on this frame yet, and I'm not seeing eggs. I do have some lovely drone brood here again. Now, it is quite a lot of drone brood, and there's a wasp, so I'm gonna get rid of that wasp. And okay, he took off by himself. No, he didn't. I'm just gonna squish that wasp, get him out of there. We don't want wasps. Okay, so let me come back. Healthy population. I see a lot of drone. It's not too much. Probably 10-ish% right now. Not too concerned about that. Certainly don't need a lot of drone at this time of year. Generally more in the spring when they go out and fertilize virgin queens. So I'm just going to put that back. And okay, where is our little girl hiding today? Where is our queen hiding? Put a little smoke, keep them down in the nest, keeping that brood nice and warm. And come on, girls, out of the way. Don't want to squish anybody. Oops, move that a little bit too far over. There we go. All right, and out we come. Lift it straight up, nice and gentle. Nice and gentle. And so, let's see. Okay, I've got some younger larvae here. And I do have, do I see some eggs in here? Let's see. Oh, it's a little too shiny now. That's crazy. I have some nice royal jelly. Okay, let's see. And do I have eggs in here? Yes, I've got some eggs in here. So let's try and zoom in.
Okay, where are they?
Okay, so let me, it's right where the bees are, right on top.
Okay.
Okay, so really where my thumb is, in these cells just in front of my thumb.
Okay.
Oh, now we're casting a shadow, of course. Can you see my thumb?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, they're the eggs.
You're looking from the side. Can you see that on the camera?
Are those eggs or those?
Well, don't make any comment. So, can we see that? I'm not sure if you can catch that. Let me try and find some more.
Let me just see if I can see the eggs just for the purpose of videography.
Don't make any comment though.
Okay.
Okay, let me just carry on and try and find some other eggs. Don't know if that showed up. Gonna look in the other. I have some younger larvae here, and I've got royal jelly, so I should be seeing some eggs around here. Anyway, I'm gonna go and look on my next frame just in case we didn't catch that one on the video. Oh, I'm gonna put her back because there's a wasp in here again. Okay, so let me just give a little puff of smoke. These girls don't mind coming out. It's a lovely hot day, as I mentioned. So they're still staying nice and quiet. And I've not seen my queen yet. Okie dokie. So let's go. Let's see what frame number 7. Lucky 7? Lucky 7. Let's see if Lucky 7 will, look, we've got some foragers with pollen. So we certainly have lots of activity and lots of nutrients coming in for the hive. And take a quick peek. Oh, here's my queen. Here she is. Beautiful. So I did mark her. She is a virgin queen from this spring. I'm just going to point her out. Pretty obvious. She's got a blue mark. Okay, we got her on the video. Now what I'm going to do is, in order to proceed with my inspection, I really don't want to hurt my queen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put her in a little cage while I finish my inspection. And oop, she's walking around, a little bit hard to catch. Get her in the cage and get her with a few of her retinue. Okay, she's in there now. And so I'm doing that. I'm caging her. And yep, she's in there. I'm caging her so that I don't accidentally injure her while I'm moving frames around. So now that I've got my queen cage here, if you could zoom in, you see how all the bees are climbing all over her. They love her. They want to keep her safe. They're looking to see if they can get to her and feed her. But right now, I'll just leave her in there for a few minutes while I try and find some more eggs. Now, since she was on this frame, I'm hoping I can find some eggs. Now, she was on the back side of number 7, Lucky 7. And I do see, hang on. Wow. Let's see now. Do I see? Gotta find those eggs. Yes, okay, so, okay, now, I'm gonna try and, without disturbing the bees too much, I'm just gonna puff the sides so that I can hold the frame, because I don't want to crush bees and get stung. And so, I'm gonna hold this up into the sun. Now, where were they? Okay, so you see where the comb is a little darker in the center, but it's got a yellow background. I've got some royal jelly in there, and I do have eggs. Now, I'm going to, with one hand, I'm going to point out the cell.
Maybe rest it on the tree, one side.
You know what? Let's crouch down. I'm going to rest
there.
it on the hive.
Okay.
And if you can crouch down, maybe behind me, that's great.
Okay,
without
and where
casting.
are the eggs?
I'll show you where the eggs are. Hang on. Oh, actually, there's a nurse bee provisioning this cell, which is a really good indication that she's feeding an egg. So I'm just going to let her do her job. I'm just going to wait a moment. And you see that she's in there. And what she's doing is she's feeding royal jelly to that egg. And they're going to feed royal jelly for the first few days to develop a worker bee. And if for some reason they had to develop a queen bee, that would be for the duration of being uncapped, so up to 9 days. Now that bee, she's, and here's another one feeding this egg, and here's another one feeding this egg. So this is beautiful. The nurse bees are busy little bees, as we say. But now I really want to get a shot of my eggs. And, okay, maybe I'll just move her on her way. Oh, she wants nothing of it. She knows the job and she can't be stopped. So if you can focus in on this area, I've got eggs in here. In this shadow. It's a little hard.
Hang on, whereabouts?
In this area right here. I'm gonna try and
There, okay, I've got one.
You got one? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just walked across it.
Okay, don't
But
make
it's
any
on the
comment.
video. It's on the video.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Okay, great. Now, after all that, I'm not surprised to see my queen on this on frame number 7, because I had very mature brood, and generally, the younger the brood, eggs, etc., that's where your queen has last been. So as you can see, speaking of the queen, she's just absolutely being protected underneath. And now that I've seen the queen, I can say that this is definitely a queen right hive. I have not seen, I'm going to talk about actually diseases and infections in just a second, but I'm going to get this frame back in, and then I just want to pull the next frame to check the nutrition of my hive, nutrition being the level of honey and pollen. As we saw, the very first frame that's down on the ground has lots of nice pollen on it and a bit of honey. And I just want to make sure that we have enough honey in the brood nest on these last couple of frames. And then what I'll do is close this up and start talking a little bit about some of the things that I might see in the hive that would need some attention. And that would be diseases, infections, pests and viruses, and varroa mite. Okay, so we've got beautiful honey here. You got a nice shot of that. Uncapped and capped. We're good. Okay, thank you. And we're getting a little bit of honey on the other side. So that's great. And I can look down in here, and I don't know if you could just zoom down in there if you can see that I've got a nice frame of honey in there as well. You can see the upper right corner, it's actually capped honey. So without further ado, I'm just going to put this frame back, move my frames over, put my last frame in, always really nice and gentle. We do not want to squish any bees. And get them, okay, that's good. Now, I'm just going to give them a puff of smoke along the edges, which is where they're most likely going to get pinched if that were the case. So I'm just going to put my hive tool down in here and gently push the frames together. Just get out of there and make sure that I'm not hurting any bees along the way. We don't want to do that. And a little bit of smoke. Okay, another little puff. Okay, that's great. Now I have lots of room to put my first frame in. And just a little puff on the handle again so I don't sting myself. So let me pick it up in the orientation that I took it out. And here's my first frame. And lovely, that's the right orientation. Put this frame back in. So of course that had most of the pollen on it. So very happy with the brood nest. I have a queen right colony. She looks good. Now, before I close up the brood nest, I am going to release my queen. I'm just gonna give them a bit of smoke so that they go in. And if you want to come on that side, or I don't know where you're going, but yeah, so I'm going to release my queen now. And by simply opening up my little queen cage, and she was on the 7th frame, 10, 9, 8, 7. So I'm going to put her back where she was so that she can continue her work. A little bit hard to open with the glove on, but we'll get it. There we go. Okay, and she just popped out. I just saw her go down, right down in there. She wasted no time. Take that. I'm just going to smoke this because there's queen pheromone on it right now, and I just don't want my bees to hang around me. So, okay, a little puff of smoke. We're going to get that queen excluder back on, and then I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking about, as I said, diseases, viruses, varroa mites, because I get a lot of questions from non-beekeepers and beekeepers about, you know, they hear things like colony collapse disorder, and they go, well, what are some of the things that affect that? So I'm just scooting the bees out of the way. I don't want to crush any of them. Okay, girls, there we go. Good. Okay, I've got a piece of grass. Take that out. Now, my honey supers look calm and quiet, so let me just get to the diseases. So basically, I did not see any evidence of diseases or bad things, or even varroa mites in my hives. So, you know, the worst bacterial disease that we might find is something called American foul brood, and that is absolutely horrible. The spores live over 40 years. They'll decimate your colony. It's a highly infectious bacterial disease. The larvae gets really goopy and brown, and if you take a toothpick, that's why I always keep toothpicks with me, and you pull out the larvae, it makes like this long stringy mucousy goop. It can smell bad. The cappings, the brood cappings would be sunken, and if it really evolves, then the larvae desiccates, and then what you find in the bottom is a really hard black scale, which is really tough to get out. So that's American foul brood. We might also have European foul brood, which can look similar. It's also kind of a goopy brown larva, not as ropey as the American foul brood, not as, it doesn't last for as long. Sorry, the spores don't live as long. A pest would be the small hive beetle that I mentioned to you when I opened up the hive, and that's a tiny black beetle which essentially, it's about a third the size of a honeybee. It'll go in, lay eggs in corners and in the honey, and it'll totally spoil your honey by fermenting it, and it'll be totally unusable. So that's a bummer, especially if you're keeping bees for honey. Another thing would be a fungal infection, which would be chalk brood. And chalk brood is what it is. It's the brood actually turns to, it essentially looks like a piece of chalk, the larvae in the bottom of your cell. It's not super detrimental to your hive. If I had a whole frame of chalk brood, I'd remove the frame, but if I saw one or two, not a big concern. And finally, sac brood. Sac brood is, again, similar, sunken dark cappings. In sac brood, you're going to have the heads of the larvae are shrunken, also brown larvae, and they'd be kind of sticking up. And if I come back to European foul brood, you'd actually see the larvae kind of look translucent, and you actually see their trachea because you can actually see through them, and they look kind of full of water. So those are all bad things. I did not see any evidence of that while looking at my brood nest. Now, varroa mites. Varroa mites are the worst problem that a beekeeper is likely to have to deal with. I'm just helping this little girl. She's stuck in the cage in the queen excluder. So varroa mites are a blood and lipid fat body sucking parasite that evolved over millennia with the Asian honeybee, the Apis cerana. And unfortunately, some 40, 50 years ago, moved over to the Western honeybee, or the Apis mellifera, which we have here. And what the varroa does, you have two types. You have phoretic varroa mite, which is a tiny, tiny reddish-brown mite that will actually walk around and attach itself to the back of the bee, or even on the belly of the bee, usually under the wings near the thorax. And the mite will actually bite the cuticle of the bee, making wounds into which all kinds of nasty viruses and infections and diseases that I just talked about can go in. So it's a pathway to that. You also have reproductive mites, which a mite will crawl into a brood cell just before it's capped. She'll lay her eggs, and those eggs will feed on the larvae. And a mature mite will emerge when the bee emerges from her cell. And so you gotta, if anything, when you're keeping bees, you gotta make sure that you are watching your mite levels. And so what I do is every spring, first thing I'll do when it's warm enough, I'll test for mites. I'll do a sugar roll because I don't like killing bees. This spring, I had these 3 hives, and 2 of my hives had 1 mite per 100 bees. 1 hive had 2.3 mites per 100. Now, you'll tolerate in a strong hive 2 mites per 100 bees through the spring and summer before you treat them. In the fall, it tends to have more mites. You'll tolerate 3 mites per 100 before the winter. However, this hive here, Fabiola, had 2.3 mites per 100. So what I did was, first of all, I did a split. I split that hive, created the split here. I treated all my hives with Formic Pro. First of all, what the split does, it makes a cut in the reproduction cycle of the brood, and hence the reproductive cycle of the mite. So that's one way of integrated pest management to lower the mite levels. I treated with Formic Pro, which is formic acid. It's an organic acid that actually exists in the beehive, but at a much higher concentration. Not high enough to harm the bees, but enough to kill the mites. And that's basically patties you put on across the top of your brood nest, underneath the exterior cover. And after 2 weeks, I retest, and all my hives had a 0.3 mites per 100 bees. So my treatment worked. I was thrilled with that. I also keep screened bottom boards. I do not close the bottoms of the hives. That allows, when the hives do their hygienic and grooming behavior, actually not hygienic, grooming behavior, they groom mites off each other and themselves, and they drop to the ground, and that's another way to control your mites. So these girls have been open for long enough, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back to my my nice honey supers, and I'm going to pop them back on. Just give them they're buzzing because they're not crazy about the smoke, but what I want to do is, if you notice here, I'm smoking the bottom of the boxes because they tend to come out if they've been out for a little while, and I want them to crawl back in the hive, which ends up that I, you know, crush less bees. So I'm just going to put my honey super up, back on my hive, and what I'll do when I put the second one on, I'll just show you how the stores are doing. I just want to kind of wiggle them on, get them out of the way, and there we go. Okay, and that's good. And I'm gonna grab my smoker and just get the next one on. And I think my husband is shielding his eyes from the sun.
No, I have a question.
You have a question, yes.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Sure, you can ask a question. Go
What
right
is
ahead.
integrated pest management?
What is integrated pest management?
You know, while you're putting the honey supers back on.
Sure, so thanks. That is a great question. So it is a technical term in beekeeping, and integrated pest management means that you don't just rely on chemicals to treat varroa mites. You do different things. So for example, you integrate management of the varroa mite. Another thing that you can do, before I mentioned earlier that there were a lot of drone brood. So let's say I just did a test and I had over 2 mites per 100. At this time of year, because I don't need all those drone, because you know there's not a lot of queens out getting fertilized, I would remove those drone brood because it takes a drone 24 days to mature. So varroa mites tend to go into the drone brood before they're capped because they have longer time to develop. So integrating your pest management means using cultural methods, which is removing drone and using, if you believe in it, chemical treatments. So I'm going to close up the hive and then I'm going to talk about what I learned today and what my objectives are for next time. So I've got no bees up here. Get that wasp out. And there we go. Okay, so my hive is closed, safe and sound. I'm really happy. What I learned today is I have a queen right hive. My pollen and honey stores are great for this time of year. I've got a healthy brood. I've got all different ages of brood. I've got no evidence of any diseases or pests. I know I have a low mite count because my last inspection 2 weeks ago, as I said, I still had 0.3 mites. What I do is I didn't just do the spring test, but I test every 4 weeks. And speaking about timing, in the spring, I'm not sure if I mentioned it at the beginning, in the spring I'll inspect my hives on a weekly basis as the population is really increasing, and especially if we've got a good flow going on, I want to make sure they have enough room and that they're developing well, and give them more space when needed. During the summer, like at this point, I'll go down to inspecting them every 2 weeks or so. So that's what I've learned today. I've got a lovely, strong, healthy hive, really happy. And for next time, what I'm going to be looking at, because it is late July, I'm going to be looking at my honey stores to see if I need to do any honey extraction, harvesting any honey. I'm always going to be looking for the health of my brood, adults and babies, as I did today. And I'm also going to be doing another mite test. I will do a sugar roll, but if I have any doubt, I will use the Varroa Easy Check. It's not a plug, but it's a great way to check your mites. And that's about it. So unless you have any other questions, thank you so much for joining me on today's inspection. Really love to have you along. And I wish you a great summer, and we'll see you next time. Bye.